Jonesy and Amanda.
Jam Nation.
Well, Donald Trump's decision to slap every country with trade barriers of at least 10%, Australia obviously was on that list, Antarctica's on that list. Russia's not, funnily enough, because apparently, according to Donald Trump, it's already under US sanctions. What does it all mean for us? What's going to happen? We're joined by the founder of CIO of the founder and CIO of Fort Lake Asset Management, one of Australia's leading economists, Dr. Christian Bayliss. Christian, hi.
Hi there, how you going? Good to speak to you guys again.
It's
Nice
always
to
good
talk
to have
to you.
you on when we need to nut this stuff out, Christian. I was reading an article recently that we have all our super, you, me, everyone, our super is invested a lot overseas, and which means like people worry about foreign ownership in Australia, but we're one of those countries that owns a lot of stuff overseas. But will this affect our super?
Well, I think this is the interesting thing, Jonesy, is it's remarkable how much the Trump administration has neglected to take into account of how many people and how many sovereigns and whatnot own assets in America, amongst other things, and that with these tariffs, which are a little bit petty in a lot of ways, just fail to recognise the bigger picture of all of this. And you're right that, say, here in Australia, over the years, our superannuation system, which is the pride of the country, has become so large and so big, and it was the thing that saved us during the financial crisis. But because we have got such huge growth in that area, we have had to invest offshore. Australia is just too small of a market for all of this superannuation money. So what it does mean is that, the Americans are beneficiaries of that superannuation money going in there. We buy toll roads over there. We're big buyers of general infrastructure, which helps the American people. And a lot of this just is totally neglected in the way that they're thinking.
Well, and we're hearing also, like, for example, our beef, that Donald Trump is saying that Australian beef, why won't they take American beef? But our bio laws are so strong for a reason. And I know both Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton have said we are not touching our bio laws. They're staying exactly as they are. But this will impact Americans, won't it? I mean, they, for all intents and purposes, elected Donald Trump because of the price of eggs. Their McDonald's prices are going to go up. What will this mean for Americans?
Well, exactly. I mean, they'll probably end up paying more for their own beef because when you think about it, Americans might not be the best producers of beef in terms of the efficiency and the cost at which they do it at. And the way the global order works is that, the best cost producer of things globally tends to get the most amount of demand. And so to the extent that Australians are very good at producing beef, the quality's good, we do it at a lower cost than what the Americans do, which is probably the case. Ultimately what this means is that if they have to repatriate all of that demand and that they only start buying American beef and drop the Australian beef imports, their consumers will ultimately pay more. But that is what Trump wants. And there are so many examples like that across so many different areas where the Americans are not the best producers, are not the most efficient producers of things, and ultimately their consumers will pay a higher price for that. But that is a gamble that he is willing to take.
So
it's an interesting one, but that's where he's at.
What is the gamble? He said yesterday was Independence Day, and he said the operation has taken place and the patient lives. It's probably too soon to say that with all the markets crashing around the world. What is his long-term goal? Will this benefit America even?
Yeah, I mean, he's got this idealistic view that he wants to, obviously make America great again, make America first, all of that sort of stuff.
But America may not be ready. Its markets aren't ready.
No, that's exactly the issue, and so it's a little bit like a python swallowing a cow. They're not ready for this. It takes a while to expand and get yourself up to scratch from an efficiency perspective, to get all of your intellectual property and these sorts of things up to scratch with the best producers in the world. And what you get in the intervening period until you get to that point, ultimately your consumers will pay a much higher price as you are transitioning to a lower cost producer of those things. And so what you get is you get this short-term spike in prices because they're not as good at doing it. Their car industry is a great example of that versus the Japanese. The Japanese are known for making great cars and doing it very efficiently. All of a sudden, if all of that demand drops away for Japanese cars, as an example, and the Americans have to fulfill those orders, they're just not going to be equipped to do that in terms of the skill of the people, the plants, the equipment, all of those sorts of things.
It's like we don't look at history at all, but this is exactly what happened in the 70s with Lee Iacocca and Chrysler. And he said at the time that if we could make, out of every 10 Chryslers, if they could make one as good as a Japanese car, he'd be happy. He actually said that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's amazing how many examples of this type of stuff we see in terms of the rap sheet of countries that he's put there and the things that he's gone after. I mean, a lot of the things that they are seeking to do, they have no competitive advantage compared to some of these other countries. And I tell you what, it's going to be an interesting experiment. And the thing with this is, the presidential term is only 4 odd years. And, by the time these industries finally get onto their feet and potentially start doing things in an efficient way, I mean, some of these industries would have lead times of 10, 15 years in order to get to that type of efficiency level. So
this all might be again in 4 years.
And that's the worrying thing, I think, and that is why global markets are tanking. That is why fear is at peak levels at the moment, because markets are saying, well, what do we do? How do we invest in this world where more than likely a lot of these tariffs and this crazy type of stuff is going to be unwound after Trump goes? So what do we actually do? Do we build our plants in America? Do we not build them? What do the Japanese do? Do they keep producing more cars? Do they not do it? So it just throws so much dust up in the air that everyone sort of, I think, sits there like stunned mullets going, what on earth do we do, and how do we actually run our businesses in this type of regime?
Can we go into a recession and indeed a depression?
Well, and that is where markets are heading, and that is the thought bubble that's gone into the mind of the markets at the moment, is everyone says with all of this uncertainty, it is surely going to make people sit on their hands, do nothing. Ultimately, consumers will probably start to pull back as well. So you get this sort of circular effect where businesses and consumers and the whole ecosystem effectively just pauses, and with that you start to get slower growth, potentially recessions, and that can lead into things like defaults with mortgages, corporate defaults as the case may be, and the whole thing can get pretty ugly pretty quickly. And that's where the markets will like to entertain those sorts of thoughts. In the fantasy of fear, that's where markets want to go. They want to consider the worst case, i.e., sell now and think later. That's how they will. That's how they will act.
All I can think of is a python swallowing a cow.
You've made me hungry, Christian.
Matter of fact, I got it now. Well, Christian, thank you for explaining that.
Thank you.
It's always great to talk to you, Christian.
No worries. Thanks for the chat, guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Christian Bayliss.
Okay.